Okay. Yeah, the gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, tonight on Forest Lane in Cold Spring, my friend Jim Lovell won't be coming home. His children, Brooke and Jack and Finn and Hudson, the youngest, who goes to school with my little girls in Cold Spring and who's played in my house, will be missing the father they love and the beloved member of the community, because he was one of the 4 victims on the Metro North train that derailed on Sunday. We all are saddened and heartbroken by this tragic event, and I stand here with my colleagues from New York to honor the 4 victims and the dozens of injured. New York lost a devoted father in Jim Lovell, but of course we also lost a loving sister in Donna Smith, a caring nurse from Queens named Kisukan Han, and a hardworking husband from Montrose. And I know my colleagues, Nita Lowy, who represents Montrose, and Joe Crowley, who represents Queens, and Elliot Engel, who represents the district where the accident occurred, and I, who represents 2 of the victims, join with all of you in standing to offer a moment of silence in honor of those killed and of those injured. And I ask that we do so now. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield such time as she would require to my colleague, Ms. Lowy from New York.
The gentleman from New York seek a separate 1 minute. Yes. Without objection, the gentlelady from New York is recognized.
I rise to honor the memory of my constituent, James Ferrari of Montrose, New York, one of the 4 individuals who lost their lives in Sunday morning's tragedy. Mr. Ferrari leaves behind a wife, a 20-year-old daughter, an extended family. My thoughts and prayers are with them during this time of pain and grief. For the last 10 years, Mr. Ferrari commuted 6 days a week into the city to his job as a building supervisor. He was a hardworking New Yorker, totally devoted to his family. His friend and neighbor told me that he did everything for his family. And now his wife, who is still in shock, and daughter are trying to put all the pieces of their lives together. Now Congress must do its part to honor all the crash victims by advancing solutions that prevent tragedies like this one from ever happening again.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Speaker,
Purposes the gentleman seek recognition.
I ask for a minute to address the House and to extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This horrific tragedy, unfortunately, happened in my district about half a mile from where I live. When a tragedy like this happens, senseless tragedy, we as Americans all pull together wherever tragedies occur, and whether it's by...
House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations out of the chamber. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
And that's what we're doing here this afternoon. We're pulling together in the face of terrible tragedy. I know that an investigation is going on from the National Transportation Safety Board, and I hope that in a short time we'll know what happened, and perhaps we'll be able to take steps to ensure that it doesn't happen again, whether it be by legislation or other types of ways we can ensure that this doesn't happen again. My heart goes out to all the victims and their families of this senseless tragedy. And we as New Yorkers and as Americans in times of tragedy always pull together. New York pulled together after 9/11, and we're pulling together after this horrific tragedy as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I too want to rise to mourn the loss of these 4 individuals and all those who were injured in this tragic accident. In particular, I want to recognize the family of Kisukan Han of Queens. The entire Korean American community in Queens and throughout the city and the tri-state region mourn her loss. She was a resident of my hometown of Woodside, Queens. Particularly want to express our sorrow on her loss and all those who lost their lives, were injured once again in this tragic event of Sunday. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family and all the victims and their families. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I'm just going to revise and extend and speak for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for
Let
1
me
minute.
thank Congressman Elliot Engel for the compassion which he's demonstrated for the families of those that survived, those that are injured, and those that have been lost. While all of us are anxious to see the results of the investigation, we all have to ask ourselves, could this be avoided? And did these people die in vain? And what are we going to do about it? It would appear to me that the first thing everyone thinks of is the infrastructure. Could this have happened in Japan, in China, or in some other industrialized country? It just stresses how important infrastructure is. It is not just the question of looking modern and developing commerce. It's human lives we're talking about. Let's not, those people who died and were injured, die in vain. Let us all collectively look at our bridges, our roads, and our tunnels, and our airports all over our great nation so that we can avoid these types of tragedies. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues for coming forward, these moving tributes. I want to add to those my condolences and those of my family. This is a very resilient nation, and New Yorkers, in tough times like these, we come together. And I have, every day, I have thousands of my constituents that ride these trains back and forth to provide for their families. And I pledge my support and those of our district as we ensure that a tragedy like this is not repeated. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.